I was having a conversation with another director recently, and she said something offhand about scheduling the day in order to get the performance that she wanted. And it was something that I had never thought about out loud or said to anyone, but it's definitely something that I do as part of my own directing practice. And it made me think about all the things about directing that's really not about directing. So, for example, the schedule of the day or the schedule of your shoot is a producing question, often handled by the AD, which, even though the AD falls under the Directors Guild or kind of the director title, is actually much more of a producing role. You're the one making sure everybody's on time and showing up and managing all the people and managing the set and just kind of keeping things going. So it's a much more managerial producing role. It can get creative, and I've had great ADs who like come up with great solutions to issues when we're running out of time and B-roll shots and things like that. But it, again, by nature, the job and your duties, it's much more producerial, managerial. But as an indie filmmaker, where I'm often the producer, writer, director, even though I work with ADs, I'm often coming up with the schedule. And that schedule is carefully thought out in terms of how I want my days to run, how I want to film the sequence of the shots. And I don't necessarily think of it in the same way in terms of this, to get the performance that I want. But at the end of the day, that is kind of the big motivator is that I want the crew to gel. I want the actors to feel comfortable. I want to get to some of the meatier scenes when we've already worked out some of the kinks in production. So you'll often hear celebrities talk about how their first day on set was a sex scene or a fight scene or something really complicated. And I typically don't like to do that. I typically like to have a day or two where we're getting substantive stuff. It's not scenes that are like throwaway scenes or B-roll or whatever. We're getting things that matter in the script, but they're not the heavy duty stuff. I want to give a couple of days for the crew to gel and for the actors to kind of, trust each other, trust me, all of those things, kind of see that things are moving forward before we dive into a sex scene or before we dive into a fight scene. I really don't like and really don't ever schedule that kind of heavy stuff on the first day. I do recommend scheduling like more technically difficult shots earlier in the day, dolly shots, things like that, because at a certain point, it just takes so long and you need to figure out if you're going to cut it and cut your losses and move on, or, or if you're going to get it and keep going. But again, for the most part, I do think about the scheduling when, or I do think about kind of the performance and working with my actors and my crew and all of that stuff when I'm coming up with the schedule. And even though that's a more producing job, it is very much for what I want and what I think will work best in order to get what I want as a director. So again, this just kind of got me thinking about, I went to film school and I teach at a film school, and both of those places focus on a very traditional approach to filmmaking, which is you need to understand all the roles in order to then specialize because filmmaking is a team sport. And you might not think that script and sound or, VFX and whatever makeup go hand in hand, but they do. Like they do relate to each other because they relate in this project. For those of you who want to be a director, I think this is helpful for really for any role, any role. It's helpful to understand. You don't have to be good at them. I mean, I'm not a good cinematographer. Like I'm not a good gaffer. Like, I mean, but I understand it and I understand the needs of it. But that, especially as a director, I do think you really have to understand it in a way because those are your tools. You might not be setting up the C stand and you might not be setting up that light or the camera or switching out the lens like yourself, but you need to understand those tools in order to have and work your vision. And again, I'm not a fan of the auteur theory because, it takes a lot of collective genius and many miracles to make a project work. And I'm a big believer in collaboration and working with people that you trust and not micromanaging them. And it always makes projects better because that kind of refinement, having another person in brain, you know, going over and understanding, as long as you guys see the same vision and agree on kind of what you're trying to do or what you're going for, um, even if that takes some conversations, like it will make your project better, it will strengthen it. And so it always is additive, when it's done right or done well. And again, I don't know all the ins and outs. I certainly don't know all the technical stuff, but I understand how it works as a storytelling tool in order to make a film. And again, I think any screenwriter who is just like, I just want to write, like it's so helpful to see your script go through production and then go through post production and then see what you end up with and how your script started out as a blueprint and then changed. And that's going to make your writing better. And, the same way that any of these other fields, I think you see how they connect and relate to each other and work off each other. So I highly recommend, even if you're very technical or interested in kind of one particular thing, I do think it's important to have some experience or even just having conversations or understanding why people are doing and making the choices that they're making in their various roles throughout production, throughout pre-production and production and post-production, because it will make you better at whatever your technical skill is. And again, as a director, I think it's imperative that you at least understand all those roles. You need to understand producing, you need to understand writing, you need to understand directing, obviously, cinematography, lighting, grip, editing, production sound, post sound, VFX. Again, you don't have to be good at them. You don't even have to be passable at any of these things, but you need to understand them because they are actually your tools and you need to be able to have conversations with those technicians in order to get what you want. And if you don't understand it, you can ask questions and, certainly it's, a learning process. And so, I'm not saying you can't do it if you don't know anything. Obviously, all of these things are learning and growth experiential things, but it helps so much as you move forward from project to project to be thinking about all these different roles and how they work in concert together.